across all sectors. This is after the unending Indigo crisis. Remember, today is the 10th and the 11th day, and already this crisis continues. The government has moved to normalize the situation. In fact, one of the ways forward is something that the Civil Aviation Ministry had said is to plan route cuts for Indigo. At least 5% of its routes are going to be reallocated to other airlines. Let me go across to Shefali, who's joining us. Shefali, as we are all aware, 65% of dominance that Indigo has in the aviation sector. One way forward is to reduce this, what many have called a monopoly. Is this going to be the way forward? What have you picked up?
So first of all, let me tell you about the notice. DGCA has issued this notice to Indigo. DGCA has reviewed Indigo's winter schedule 2025 due to the widespread flight disruption and cancellations that we have seen in the first week of December. DGCA told in that letter that Indigo was approved 15,014 departures per week, which is totaling around 64,000 flights for November 2025. But the actual operations fell short, is what the DGCA notice said. And in November itself, Indigo saw 951 cancellations. So now DGCA is directing Indigo to reduce its schedule by 5% across sector, focusing on high demand and high frequency. And now this can also mean that the 5% reduction would mean that these schedule will be given to other airlines for the time being, or however the DGCA sees it. And DGCA has also asked for a response, a revised schedule by 5 p.m. tomorrow, that is 10th of December.
Well, in fact, do stay on with us. Let me go across to Hina Gambhir also, who's joining us. Hina, you must explain to us this 5% of route cut. What does it mean on the ground? Other aviation leaders are now going to be picking up the slack, and how it is going to impact the passengers at the end of it all.
Well, simply put, this is a punishment for Indigo, which currently operates around 2,200 to 2,300 flights per day. A 5% reduction, if you see, if we look at 2,300 as the number of flights that Indigo operates daily, which means there is going to be a reduction of 115 odd flights per day that Indigo used to operate. Now, these 115 odd flights, Meghna, are going to be available to other airlines who have, in fact, complied with the new guidelines, the new FDTL norms on time, which Indigo did not. So clearly, it's going to benefit other airlines. It is being seen as punishment for Indigo. For passengers, nothing is really going to change. Passengers will now have options in terms of other airlines as well. Now, what is also important to note here is that these are high frequency routes that DGCA is going to be picking, which will be taken away from Indigo and will be available for other airlines to really pick up, or they will be given to other airlines which have, of course, better services. So this is clearly a setback for Indigo, but it's not really enough given what Indigo has done with the passengers over the last 7 days. Today is day 8. Of course, the number of cancellations today is much lower. But again, it has caused, this entire mess has caused a lot of inconvenience to the passengers. Another big question is, only refunds are not going to be enough. Now, there are, passengers who are coming out and saying that we need to be compensated for the higher amount that we have paid for alternate flights, for the kind of, mental stress that it has given to several passengers. So on that front, we'll have to wait and see how the government and DGCA decides to compensate the passengers via Indigo.
Well, absolutely. You're right. It's not enough to merely refund. What about compensation? Because let's not talk about the kind of mental harassment, the inconvenience, and the physical fatigue which people had to bear. It's not just about the money. What about the other pain which is associated with the entire Indigo meltdown? In fact, this is what the DGCA has said in the notice. I'm going to read it out for you. It says that it has come to the notice of the DGCA that the winter schedule of 2025 as approved for Indigo was examined against the backdrop of the wide disruptions due to massive cancellation. It was observed that as per this winter schedule, there were departures per week, which was 15,014 departures per week were approved by Indigo, amounting to about 64,346 6 flights which were approved for the month of November. Whereas as per the operational data which has been submitted, it has been observed that there were 59,438 flights which were actually operating during November 2025. So it is compared to about SS25, Indigo was allowed an enhancement of the schedule with 6% of 403 aircraft as opposed to 341 aircraft. However, it has been observed that the airline could operate only 339 aircraft and 334 aircraft in November. So essentially, they were given the flight routes, they failed to operate, they failed to comply with the rules of the DGCA. Goes on to say that it is now inferred that Indigo has increased its departure by 9.66% in comparison to the winter schedule and by 6% in relation to the summer schedule. However, the airline has not demonstrated an ability to operate these schedules efficiently. Very directly